That debate was a train wreck in pretty much every way possible. First of all, shame on ABC. It was an ambush disguised as a debate. It was 3 against 1, the ABC moderators, plus Kamala Harris against Donald Trump. Then Kamala Harris absolutely failed to reveal anything more about her policies, get into the details of her agenda, and Donald Trump failed to take a swipe at the low-hanging fruit. He failed to call out Kamala Harris on her lies and to hold the ABC moderators accountable for their double standards. I mean, there were no clear winners in this debate. And so in my book, I think it was an honest draw. You could make the case that Kamala won. You could make the case that Trump won. Look, neither party delivered a knockout blow. Trump didn't knock out Kamala Harris. Kamala, even though the media and all the pundits are saying that she won, she didn't knock off Donald Trump either. You know, they're both standing strong. No knockout blows. And most importantly, no one said or did anything that would destroy their campaigns. Kamala Harris didn't get caught in the word salad trap that she's famous for. And Donald Trump, despite what the media is saying, you know, they're saying he looked angry. I actually think he held his cool. He maintained an even temperament. So what this is all going to come down to are, what I think are 2 different camps. Swing voters, undecided voters, and then low information voters who aren't engaged, who aren't political news junkies. So in this video, I'm going to explain, in that sense, why I think Trump won, and I'm going to try to make my case to prove that. And then I'm also going to call out both Kamala Harris for her flip-flops and her lies, as well as the ABC moderators for the abysmal job that they did at moderating this debate. So it's going to be a few days. It's going to be a little while till we get official polling that takes into account the aftermath of this debate. But, you know, online polls, they're not scientific, but they can sometimes give you a feel for the water. Here is C-SPAN, who won the ABC News presidential debate. 24.8% Kamala Harris, 75.2% for Donald Trump, 200,000 votes plus. Again, not a scientific poll, just an online poll. But the reason I pointed this out is because this is C-SPAN. It's not like this is a Fox News or a Newsmax poll or an outlet that can be accused of leaning to the right. I think C-SPAN, pretty, you know, I don't want to say lame is not the right word, but I call them apolitical compared to some of the others. And then on top of that, we had this CBS panel where they bashed Kamala Harris after the debate. Again, CBS, not a Trump-friendly network.
He spoke facts. She just basically repeated everything that Biden has said in the past.
What were your thoughts?
Donald Trump made a strong closing statement by saying, why didn't they do all the things that she's proposing during the 3.5 years that they've been in office? And Biden did this entire moderate stance back in 2020, and she's trying to do it again in 2024, but she didn't talk about her policy changes between 2020 and 2024. Her whole centrist moderate stance is just a facade.
So if you notice at the bottom of the screen on the chyron there, it said that these were Pennsylvania undecided voters. So the fact that undecided voters in Pennsylvania on CBS are saying positive things about President Trump after this debate, again, it's not scientific, but I do think it is a good sign. And it's not just these panels. It's not just these interviews and online polls. Even some of the pundits are admitting that Kamala Harris didn't necessarily have the best night that the Democrat Party is trying to make it out that they had. Take a look at ABC, where they admitted that, yes, Kamala didn't do a good job of explaining her policies.
Vice President Kamala Harris did not do a great job today really explaining her policy shifts, right? And that is what they have been seizing on. They're really trying to define her for voters when voters have a lot of questions about her policy positions.
Voters have a lot of questions about her policy positions. That's something I want you to keep in mind because we're going to come back to that in a moment. Now, CNN did do a flash poll before and after the debate. And again, this isn't one of the big polls, right? Because it's probably going to take 24, 48, maybe 72 hours before we truly see the impact of this debate and any polling numbers. But CNN did a flash poll, and apparently Trump gained a few points and Kamala Harris lost a few points, specifically in regards to which candidate is better to handle the economy.
The economy here, who would better handle the economy is what we ask. Going into the debate, before the debate, 37% said Harris, 53% Trump. After the debate, again, margin of error stuff here, but numerically she lost a little ground. 35% said so after the debate, that she would better handle the economy. 55% said Trump, and we know that is one of his strongest suits across the polling in this election, and he seemed to hang on to that piece in this debate tonight, according to our poll of debate.
And as James Carville famously said, it's the economy, stupid. And I think that's true. I think people are going to vote based on their pocketbooks. And inflation is still up. Cost of living is up. Wages are down. Unemployment is creeping back up and creeping back up pretty quickly. So the New York Times is also confirming that there are still a lot of undecided voters. Again, the reason I like citing the mainstream media, especially some of these left-leaning outlets, is because if you know that an outlet like the New York Times is saying something bad about Kamala Harris, then the reality is a lot worse. You know, if the New York Times is saying something good about Donald Trump, you know the reality is a lot better. Well, according to the New York Times, pundits said Harris won the debate. Undecided voters weren't so sure. The New York Times, you know, they spent some time with voters in deep blue New York City, and they found that, quote, voters said the vice president talked about a sweeping vision to fix the country's most stubborn problems, but they wanted the fine print, and they didn't have that. The New York Times spent time with these voters in a bar. They interviewed them. You can find the article online, and, you know, just as it said there, not great news for Harris. Now, Puck, they're not as big of an outlet, but as some of you know, I work in the entertainment industry, and Puck is one of the trades. They're sort of like the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times of Hollywood. And according to Puck, in a survey of battleground state voters released Monday, the Democratic polling firm Blueprint found that swaths of swing voters hadn't seen or heard anything about many of the topics that have dominated campaign news coverage. About 30% of voters, Blueprint discovered, either never watched or never heard a single thing about Harris and Trump's convention speeches. So this is an important point, because what they said on ABC News earlier, that clip that I played earlier, was that, you know, voters still have questions about Kamala Harris. And, you know, if you're watching this video right now, if you watch my channel, chances are you're a political junkie. You want the latest political news. But a lot of people, you know, they're busy living their lives. They're busy working jobs, hanging out with friends, taking care of their families, trying to put food on the table, and they're not as plugged in as those of us who are news junkies. And when you take a look at this, you know, 28% of people had not watched or even heard of Harris's convention speech. 30%, same for Donald Trump's. Compare that to Trump pumping his fist and saying fight after he was shot at. 64% of American adults watched that. 20% heard that happened, and only 16 hadn't heard of it. So when it comes to the iconic moments, the iconic imagery from this campaign, the vast majority of Americans have seen Trump's strength. They've seen his resilience. But when it comes to what the rest of us political junkies are interested in, the press conferences, the conventions, even the controversy at Arlington National Cemetery, you know, up to a third, up to even half of voters haven't heard or seen anything about it. So I think this campaign is going to be won on sound bites that are, you know, taken out from this campaign and used in ads, as well as the media spin coming out of it. And for those who do watch it, I think that's why the 3-on-1 imagery, not just Americans, I think humans in general, we love a good underdog. Forget about what you think about Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. If you just turned on the TV, imagine you know nothing about politics, because apparently, based on the polling, up to a third of the country doesn't follow any of this. You know, they may have heard things about Donald Trump. They may have a preconceived notion, but let's say you don't follow it. You're part of that 1/3 of the country, and you turn on the TV and you see it's 3 ganging up on 1. Regardless of your thoughts of Donald Trump, he's immediately the underdog in that situation. And I think that people feel for that. People want to root for the underdog. And Some may say that's hopeful wishing. Some may think that that's a hope. But I think that psychology is something, and I'm going to talk about the psychology of Trump's performance at the very end of this video, but I think that that's something that we can't discount. Now, CNN also did their own panel of undecided voters, and even they are saying positive things about Donald Trump.
It's actually going to make our country better, and we're in an incredibly unique situation where we've had both of the candidates in office before, and we've gotten to see what they would do. And when facts come to facts, my life was better when Trump was in office. The economy was higher, inflation was lower, things were better overall. And now with Kamala's administration, things haven't been so fantastic. And she's saying she can fix the problems that her administration has caused, but I just don't know if I can afford to take that risk.
That right there is the prime example of why this debate might not even matter in terms of, like I said, I think it's a draw. You know, neither candidate delivered a knockout punch, but also neither candidate faltered in Joe Biden style, Joe Biden fashion. You know, I think the numbers are going to stay relatively unchanged in this race. And so the impact is going to be how the campaigns can spin this and how the campaigns can move forward from this. And that's why I think the advantages are with Donald Trump. So one of the examples of this is CNN, right? And I think that Republicans and the Trump campaign are going to start hammering this home. CNN claimed that Donald Trump made 33 false claims and Kamala Harris only made 1. And then even on the other CNN programming, they were trying to defend that. Abby D. Phillips, also of CNN, said, just FYI, when there is asymmetrical lying, there will be asymmetrical fact-checking. Well, Donald Trump was fact-checked 5 times during that debate. Kamala Harris was fact-checked 0 times. And again, just a reminder, they're saying Kamala Harris only lied once. Donald Trump lied 33 times. So I'm going to go through some Kamala Harris lies right now. Now, the one lie that they counted for her was her position on fracking. So I'm not going to cover that. But one of the lies she said was she claimed that she was never going to take away people's guns. This is her during the debate last night.
I've made very clear my position on fracking. And then this business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away.
Flat out lie. And that should have been counted as a lie. Second of all, David Muir should be ashamed of himself because she actually told, David Muir also moderated one of the Democratic primary debates. And during that debate, Kamala Harris admitted that she was going to use executive action to confiscate people's guns, to do mandatory gun buybacks. She did that during a Democrat primary debate, which David Muir hosted. So he should have known that from his history. He should have known that from his homework. He should have fact-checked her, and he didn't. Here's my evidence.
In recent days, former Vice President Biden has said about executive orders, some really talented people are seeking the nomination. They said, I'm going to issue an executive order. Biden saying there's no constitutional authority to issue that executive order when they say I'm going to eliminate assault weapons, saying you can't do it by executive order any more than Trump can do things when he says he can do it by executive order. Does the vice president have a point there?
Some things you can, many things you can't.
Let's let the senator answer.
Well, I mean, I would just say, hey, Joe, instead of saying no, we can't, let's say yes, we can.
Let's be constitutional. We got a constitution.
And yes, we can.
So there you go. Yes, we can. And then you even had Joe Biden saying it's not constitutional. That's why he's saying, it has to be constitutional. Well, it wasn't even just that debate. Again, if David Muir had done his homework, he would know that Kamala Harris has flat out said she wants to take away people's guns. Here's a compilation.
We have to have a buyback program, and I support a mandatory buyback program. It's got to be smart. We got to do it the right way.
Do you believe in the mandatory buyback of quote-unquote assault weapons?
I do believe that we need to do buyback.
So there you go. That's at least one other lie that Kamala Harris made on stage, and she didn't get fact-checked on that. She also brought up the bloodbath hoax. She wasn't fact-checked on this, and this apparently wasn't counted as a lie, but it is a lie. Let me prove it to you. Here's what she said on the debate last night.
On that point, Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath if this and the outcome of this election is not to his liking.
Okay, he was clearly talking about the economy. I think that was a missed moment for Trump to call her out for being a liar, for Trump to call out the moderator. And I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent here. I think that's why so many people are upset with Trump's performance. I think it's an issue of expectations, right? Because the expectations for Kamala Harris was so low. We were expecting word salad. A lot of people were expecting word salad. And the expectations for Trump were really high after the June debate with Joe Biden, where after one debate, Trump just knocked Joe Biden out of the race. So we have these two different expectations, and when reality doesn't meet expectation, that's where disappointment comes in. So I think that's why many people were disappointed. But here's what Trump actually said. He was talking about car manufacturing.
Car manufacturing plants that you're building in Mexico right now, and you think you're going to get that, you're going to not hire Americans, and you're going to sell the cars to us. Now, we're going to put a 100% tariff on every single car that comes across the line, and you're not going to be able to sell those cars. If I get elected, now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole, that's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country. That'll be the least of it. But they're not going to sell those cars. They're building massive factories. A friend of mine...
Yeah, so he was talking about bloodbaths in the car manufacturing industry. He wasn't talking about a civil war. He wasn't talking about violence in the streets like Kamala Harris tried to make it seem like. She wasn't called out for lying about that. And again, ABC News didn't fact check her on that. Well, that wasn't the only hoax Kamala Harris brought up. She also brought up the Very Fine People Charlottesville hoax. And again, surprise, surprise, no fact check from ABC. So here I am to do their job.
Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side.
And you had some very bad people in that group. But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group, excuse me, and you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally. But you had many people in that group other than neo-Nazis and white nationalists, okay?
Even Snopes has confirmed that that hoax is a lie. You know it's bad when even Snopes is in favor of Donald Trump because Snopes has a very left-wing bias. Of course, Snopes was about 4 years too late on correcting their stance on that, but hey, better late than never. Now, Kamala Harris also tried to connect and tether Donald Trump to Project 2025. Even though I thought that was old news, she attempted to do this last night.
What you're going to hear tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that the former president intends on implementing if he were elected again. I believe very strongly that the American people want a president who understands the importance of bringing us together, knowing we have so much more in common.
Now, there is just one problem with her lie. Not only has Trump denounced Project 2025, within 24 hours of the debate, the person, the architect behind Project 2025, actually went on CNN and admitted in front of the entire world, in front of the entire country, that Trump himself had nothing to do with Project 2025. So I'm sure that the ABC News moderators knew this, and for whatever reason, they chose not to fact check her.
You know, the breaking news is Trump has nothing to do with Project 2025. Sure, a lot of us have worked in the admin and came together, but this started long before he even announced for president.
One of the clearest examples of this bias, though, especially the 3-on-1, the ABC moderators and Kamala against Trump, was when it came to abortion. And their fact check on Trump was very deceptive. Now, if you weren't really paying close attention, it may have slid under the radar, but when you take a look at what Trump actually said versus what they fact-checked, they hit a straw man argument. They fact-checked him on something he didn't say, and in fact, their fact-check was wrong. So here's what Trump said about abortion.
Will she allow abortion in the 8th month, 9th month, 7th month?
Come on.
Okay, would you do that? Why don't you ask her that question?
Why don't you?
Wait a minute. I thought they were supposed to have muted mics, right? Wasn't that the rule? Why is Kamala's mic not muted?
That's
Answer
the problem.
Question, would you
because
veto?
Under Roe v.
Answer
Wade,
the question, would you veto?
you could do abortions in the 7th month, the 8th month, the 9th
That's
month,
not true.
and probably after birth. Just look at the governor, former governor of Virginia. The governor of Virginia said we put the baby aside and then we determine what we want to do with the baby.
So what did Trump say? Trump said, look at the governor of Virginia. We put the baby aside, and then he goes, explains what happened there in Virginia, Governor Ralph Northam. Now, ABC News tried to fact check him, and so Trump made a statement about what Governor Northam said, and then they fact checked him with nothing to do with Trump's statement on the governor's statement.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born. Madam Vice President, I want to get your response to.
Okay, so they fact-checked him on something he didn't say. And then we actually have footage of Governor Northam saying exactly what Trump said, that they will allow a baby to be born and then abort that baby after birth.
No exception. There was a very contentious committee hearing yesterday when Fairfax County Delegate Kathy Tran made her case for lifting restrictions on third trimester abortions, as well as other restrictions now in place. And she was pressed by a Republican delegate about whether her bill would permit an abortion even as a woman is essentially dilating, ready to give birth. And she answered that it would permit an abortion at that stage of labor. Do you support her measure and explain her answer?
Yeah, and I wasn't there, Julie, and I certainly can't speak for Delegate Tran, but I will tell you first thing I would say is this is why decisions such as this should be made by providers, physicians, and the mothers and fathers that are involved. There are, when we talk about third trimester abortions, these are done with the consent of obviously the mother, with the consent of the physicians, more than one physician, by the way. And it's done in cases where there may be severe deformities, there may be a fetus that's non-viable. So in this particular example, if a mother is in labor, I can tell you exactly what would happen. The infant would be delivered. The infant would be kept comfortable. The infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and the family desired. And then a discussion would ensue between the physicians and the mother.
Make a decision? Make a decision about what? About killing the baby, of course. So that was Governor Northam talking about, we'll let the baby be born, we'll keep the baby comfortable, and then we'll make a decision as to whether or not we want to abort the baby, which is what Donald Trump said on the debate stage. He specifically referenced the governor of Virginia, then ABC News. Lindsay Davis tried to fact check him, but she didn't fact check what he actually said because what he said was true. So that was a very deceptive straw man there that unfortunately I think slipped under the radar for most people. Now, fortunately for Trump, he did hit his stride. Unfortunately for Trump, it came a little too late. It came at the very end. I think he knocked it out of the park with his closing statement. And it's true, you want to start strong, you want to end strong. Unfortunately, though, most people, start watching at the beginning, then viewership trails off towards the end, especially with such late events. The good news, though, is, because of this strong closing statement, the campaign can at least use it in ads and on social media. Now, I'll play that for you in a bit, but I want to talk a little bit about the psychology of the debate for both candidates. I'm really trying to put myself in the shoes of the campaign consultants and the advisors for each candidate. So I think for Kamala Harris, if I were in her campaign, I think they probably had two major goals. Number one, to prove her competency, avoid word salad at all costs. And number two, in order to avoid talking about policy, to goad and to bait Donald Trump. And I think she successfully achieved both of those goals. And I think that's why so many conservatives were taken aback. I think that's why this debate ended up being a wash, ended up being a draw. Because yes, she accomplished both of those things. But again, there was never a knockout blow. She never took down Donald Trump. Now, for Donald Trump, if I was in his campaign shoes, I think the biggest thing had to have been about temperament. And I think that's why we saw the performance from Trump that we saw yesterday. They understood that she's female and she's black, so she's a black female. Trump, unfortunately, this is an election of vibes. It's an election of visuals, and so he's the old white straight man against the younger black woman. I mean, he couldn't have been too harsh like he has been in other debates, and so I think he had to keep his cool. But on top of that, think of it from his perspective. He survived an assassination attempt. Really, think about this. If you were the survivor of an assassination attempt, if you had lawfare coming at you, and if you believed that the current administration was responsible for that lawfare, I mean, and there's credibility for that, right? One of the top people from the DOJ, from the Biden DOJ, somehow, coincidentally, shows up at Alvin Bragg's office, the same office in New York that prosecuted and has essentially gotten a conviction against Donald Trump. Now we're waiting for that sentencing. So you have the current administration against you with lawfare, the assassination attempt, and you're standing in front of two biased debate moderators. I don't know about you, but I would be fuming on the inside, and I would want to be raging and want to tear them to shreds. So I think that there was debate prep. I know a lot of Democrats and a lot of pundits are saying that Donald Trump should have come prepared. I think he did come prepared. We know that he prepared because there were reports beforehand that the campaign tapped Tulsi Gabbard to help Donald Trump. I think the preparation, I think a lot of people were expecting a knockout blow, but based on the performance, I think it's clear to see and clear to say that maybe the performance was about keeping Trump at just an evenly cooled temperature throughout, to avoid any outbursts, to avoid any name calling. And a lot of people, they're saying, oh, he just repeated the same talking points from his rallies. Well, remember what I showed you earlier in the video. Up to a third, and in some cases, up to a half of Americans hadn't seen or hadn't heard any of the major political events. So if they haven't seen or heard about any of those major political events, we all know they haven't tuned into a Trump rally. So what he was doing was staying on message for the people tuning in to the campaign for the first time. So I don't think it's fair to say that he necessarily lost. I think at the end of the day, realistically, it was a draw, it was a wash, but there are many positives, and so we can say Trump won, especially since his campaign seems to be, moving forward in the right direction after this debate. Now, as I promised, here is Trump's closing statement, and I think he hit it out of the park.
President Trump.
So she just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years. They've had 3.5 years to fix the border. They've had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done it? She should leave right now, go down to that beautiful White House, go to the Capitol, get everyone together and do the things you want to do, but you haven't done it, and you won't do it because you believe in things that the American people don't believe in.
As always, all of this is just my commentary and analysis, and I would love to know yours in the comments below. What do you think about the debate? Do you agree that it was a draw or perhaps a win, quotation marks, for Trump, or do you have another opinion? Do you think it was a win for Harris? Do you think it affects the race at all or has no effect on the race? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below or on anything, your thoughts on anything we covered in this video. A lot of different clips and a lot of, I think a lot of meat here, hopefully. If you haven't already, please be sure to give me a thumbs up. I know it's a simple thing to ask, but it really does help me in the algorithm to reach more viewers like you. Be sure to smash that subscribe button and to check out one of these videos.